The banquet hall smelled of pine smoke and roasted meat, a heavy scent that clung to the velvet curtains and settled into my hair. I stood near the stone archway, half hidden by shadows, watching the pack celebrate another successful hunt. Laughter echoed off the vaulted ceiling, glasses clinked, and somewhere a fiddle started playing a tune that made the younger wolves howl with delight. I didn't belong in that joy. I never had. My fingers twisted together at my waist, a nervous habit I'd never managed to break. The fabric of my simple gray dress felt coarse compared to the silks and furs draped over the she-wolves who danced in the center of the hall. They moved with confidence, their hair catching the firelight, their voices bright and certain. I was none of those things. At 23, I was still called the Pale One or the Quiet Girl by most of the pack. Some didn't call me anything at all. They simply looked past me, as if I were part of the stonework. My mother used to say that being overlooked was a kind of safety. Not everyone needs to shine, Iris, she'd whispered once, brushing my blonde hair away from my face. Some of us are meant to observe, to understand, to hold the pack together from the edges. She'd been a beta's mate, soft-spoken and steady, and she'd died when I was 16. The pack mourned her politely for 3 days, then moved on. I'd mourned her every day since. Tonight, the Alpha King was here. I hadn't seen him yet, but I felt his presence like a change in air pressure before a storm. The pack elders had been preparing for weeks, ordering the halls cleaned, the kitchens stocked, the grounds patrolled. He was visiting our territory to assess our strength, to ensure we remained loyal to the crown. We were a small pack, tucked into the mountain forests far from the capital, and we survived by being useful and unobtrusive. The king's approval meant everything. Iris, stop lurking like a ghost. I turned to find Mara, one of the younger she-wolves, grinning at me. She was vibrant and lovely, with dark curls and eyes that sparkled with mischief. We'd grown up together, though our paths had diverged sharply over the years. She was destined for a good match, maybe even with one of the elite guards. I was destined for nothing in particular. I'm not lurking, I said quietly. I'm just hiding, she finished, looping her arm through mine. Come on, you have to at least see him. Everyone's talking about how imposing he is. I'm fine here. You're not fine. You're practically invisible. She tugged me forward gently, and I know you don't want attention, but Iris, you can't spend your whole life in the corners. What would your mother say? That struck deeper than she knew. I let her pull me closer to the crowd. Though my heart hammered against my ribs, the sea of bodies parted slightly, and I caught my first glimpse of the high table. He sat in the center, draped in black and silver, his posture so still he might have been carved from granite, the Alpha King. Even from a distance, his presence was overwhelming. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, dark hair that fell just past his collar. His eyes scanned the room with the lazy menace of a predator, completely secure in his dominance. When his gaze swept over our section of the hall, I felt it like a physical touch, cold and assessing. I dropped my eyes immediately. Terrifying, isn't he? Mara whispered, her breath warm against my ear. I nodded. Terrifying. And something else I couldn't name. The pack's beta, a man named Colton, stood and raised his glass. The hall quieted. To our king, he declared, his voice booming. May his reign be long and his enemies short-lived. A cheer erupted. I lifted my glass with everyone else, but I didn't drink. My throat felt too tight. The king inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the toast, but he didn't smile. He looked bored. Or perhaps just alone. It was a strange thought, one I pushed away immediately. Men like him weren't lonely, they were untouchable. As the music swelled again and couples moved toward the center to dance, Mara squeezed my arm. Oh, there he is, she breathed. Who? Finian, the king's beta. She nodded toward the high table, where a younger man had just leaned in to speak to the king. He was handsome in an easy, approachable way. Sandy hair, a quick smile, warm brown eyes. He looked like sunlight compared to the king's storm. He's so hot, Mara said, her voice tinged with awe. I glanced at Finian again. He was attractive, certainly, kind-looking. The sort of man who might actually see someone like me. But I didn't feel anything when I looked at him. No pull. No spark. I suppose, I murmured. Mara laughed. You suppose? Iris, he's gorgeous. And a beta to the king. Can you imagine? She sighed dreamily. I'd give anything for him to notice me. I smiled faintly, about to respond, when I felt it. A shift in the air, sharp and sudden. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, slowly. I turned my head toward the high table. The Alpha King was staring directly at me. Not near me, not through me, at me. His eyes were pale, almost silver in the firelight, and they pinned me in place with an intensity that stole my breath. His expression hadn't changed, still unreadable, still cold. But there was something simmering beneath the surface. Something dangerous. I couldn't look away. My pulse thundered in my ears. Around me, the celebration continued, oblivious, but I felt like the entire world had narrowed to that single burning gaze. Then Finian said something, drawing the king's attention, and the connection broke. I gasped softly, stumbling back a step. Iris? Mara frowned. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, I lied. My hands were shaking. I need some air. Before she could argue, I slipped away, weaving through the crowd toward the side doors that led to the gardens. My heart was still racing, my skin too warm despite the autumn chill. What had just happened? Why had he looked at me like that? The garden was quiet, the sounds of the banquet muffled by distance and stone. I pressed my palms against the cool fountain edge, gulping down the night air. The stars were sharp overhead, and the moon was nearly full, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. You run easily. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The Alpha King stood 10 paces away, half shrouded in darkness. He must have moved silently, impossibly fast. His expression was still unreadable, but his eyes, those pale, predatory eyes, were locked on me. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I stammered, dropping into a clumsy curtsy. I didn't mean to. To what? His voice was low, almost soft, but it carried an edge that made me flinch. To leave the celebration? To hide in the shadows? He took a step closer. Or to let your friend speak so freely about my beta? My stomach dropped. He'd heard Mara. Of course he had. Wolves had excellent hearing, and an Alpha King's senses were sharper than anyone's. She meant no disrespect, I said quickly. She was just admiring him. Another step. He was close enough now that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his jaw tightened, and you agreed. I faltered. I hadn't agreed. I'd barely said anything. But he clearly believed otherwise, and arguing with an Alpha King seemed like an excellent way to end up exiled. Or worse. You suppose he's attractive. His tone was mocking now, a cruel echo of my own words. How generous of you. I didn't mean... What did you mean? He was close enough now that I could smell him. Pine and smoke, and something darker, like earth after rain. His presence was suffocating. Tell me, little wolf, do you often assess my people so casually? No. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I was being polite. My friend was excited, and I didn't want to... To what? Hurt her feelings? He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. How noble. There was something wrong, something simmering beneath his words that I didn't understand. He wasn't angry about disrespect. This was something else. Something personal. I should return inside, I said softly, taking a small step back. I apologize if I offended you. You didn't offend me. His eyes flashed. You bored me. The words stung more than they should have. I'd spent my whole life being invisible, but being called boring by the most powerful wolf in the realm felt like a different kind of rejection. I lifted my chin slightly, meeting his gaze even though every instinct screamed at me to submit. Then I won't waste any more of your time, Your Majesty. I moved to walk past him, but his hand shot out, catching my wrist. Not hard, not painful, but firm enough to stop me in my tracks. I didn't dismiss you. I froze. His skin was warm against mine, his grip steady. My pulse hammered beneath his fingers, and I knew he could feel it. What do you want? I whispered. For a long moment he didn't answer. He just stood there, holding my wrist, staring down at me with those impossible eyes. Then slowly, his thumb brushed over the inside of my wrist, right where my pulse beat fastest. I don't know yet, he said quietly. And for the first time, he sounded almost uncertain. Then he released me and stepped back, his expression shuddering closed once more. Go inside, he ordered. And stay away from my beta. Before I could respond, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, moving with the silence of a ghost. I stood there, trembling, my wrist still tingling where he'd touched me. What had just happened? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed in the women's quarters, staring at the ceiling beams while my mind replayed every second of that encounter. His voice, his eyes, the way his thumb had traced my pulse. Stay away from my beta. The command made no sense. I had no interest in Finian. I'd barely looked at him. Yet the Alpha King had spoken as if I'd committed some unforgivable transgression. When dawn finally broke, pale and cold through my small window, I rose and dressed in my work clothes, sturdy brown trousers and a cream tunic. Most she-wolves in the pack didn't work in the stables or the gardens, but I'd never fit the mold of what was expected. My mother had taught me that usefulness was its own kind of worth, so I'd learned to tend horses, to coax life from stubborn soil, to mend things that were broken. The stables were quiet at this hour, just the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls, and the morning birds beginning their songs. I grabbed a brush and slipped into the stall of my favorite mare, a dappled gray named Moonshine. She nickered softly, pressing her nose against my shoulder. Morning, beautiful, I murmured, running the brush along her neck in long, soothing strokes. This at least made sense. Horses didn't care if you were invisible. They only cared if you were kind. You're up early. I jumped, spinning around so fast I nearly dropped the brush. Finian stood in the stable doorway, backlit by the rising sun. He wore simple traveling clothes, and his expression was open and friendly. Nothing like the intensity of his king. I'm sorry, he said quickly, raising his hands. I didn't mean to startle you. I was just looking for someone to help with my horse. The stable master said I might find you here. Oh. I swallowed, acutely aware of the king's warning from the night before. Stay away from my beta, but Finian had sought me out. What was I supposed to do? Of course. Which one is yours? The black stallion, third stall down. He stepped inside, his movements easy and unthreatening. He's got a stone caught in his front hoof, I think. I'm not great with horses. I nodded, setting down my brush and moving to the stallion's stall. The horse was magnificent, tall and powerful, with intelligent eyes. He stamped nervously as I approached, but I kept my movements slow and calm, murmuring nonsense words the way my mother had taught me. Finian watched from a respectful distance. You're good with him. Horses are easier than people, I said, without thinking, then flushed. I'm sorry. That sounded honest? He smiled. I think I understand what you mean. People are complicated. Horses just want to be understood. I lifted the stallion's hoof carefully, finding the small stone wedged near the frog. Working it free took patience, but eventually it came loose. The horse snorted, as if thanking me. There, I said quietly, lowering his leg. He should be fine now. You have a gift. Finian's voice was warm with genuine appreciation. Thank you. I'm Finian, by the way, though I suppose you knew that. Iris. I wiped my hands on my trousers, suddenly aware of how plain I must look. Stable dirt under my nails, hair pulled back in a messy braid. No prettiness to speak of. Iris, he repeated, as if testing the name. That suits you. Delicate but resilient. Heat crept up my neck. I wasn't used to compliments, and I didn't quite know what to do with them. I should get back to work. Of course. He paused, then added, Would you mind if I visited the stables again? I'd like to learn more about horse care. We don't have much time for it at the capital, but I've always wanted to understand them better. Every instinct told me to say no. The king's warning echoed in my mind, but Finian's request was so earnest, so harmless, and I couldn't think of a polite way to refuse. I'm here most mornings, I said carefully. His smile brightened. Then I'll see you tomorrow, perhaps. After he left, I sagged against Moonshine's stall, my heart racing again. This was dangerous. I could feel it in my bones, but I didn't understand why. The king stayed in our territory for a week. I saw him only at a distance, crossing the courtyard with his guards, standing on the training fields watching our warriors spar, dining with the pack elders. He never looked at me again, never spoke to me. It was as if that night in the garden had never happened. Finian, however, came to the stables every morning. He was easy to talk to, genuinely curious about everything. He asked about the horses, about the forest, about pack life in the mountains. I found myself relaxing around him, answering his questions, even laughing at his self-deprecating jokes about his own clumsiness. I once fell off a horse in front of the entire king's guard, he admitted on the third morning, grinning sheepishly. Roman, that's the king. He didn't say a word. Just looked at me like I'd personally disappointed every ancestor I'd ever had. Roman, I repeated softly. I hadn't known the king's name. It felt strange on my tongue, intimate. Don't let him hear you use it, Finian said quickly. He's very particular about titles. Even I have to call him Your Majesty in public. He seems... I hesitated, searching for the right word. Severe. He is. Finian's expression grew more serious. But he's also the best man I know. Loyal. Just... He carries the weight of the entire realm on his shoulders, and he never complains, never falters. He paused. He's just lonely, I think. Even if he'd never admit it. Lonely. The same word I'd thought that first night. I wondered what it was like, to have all that power and still feel alone. You care about him, I observed. He's my king. And my friend. Finian met my eyes. One of the few people who's ever seen me as more than just a beta. He gave me a place when I had nothing. There was a story there. I could tell. Pain beneath the easy smile. We all carried scars. On the fifth morning, Finian didn't come alone. I was mucking out one of the stalls when I heard voices. Finian's warm tones, and another, deeper voice that made my hands still on the pitchfork. Show you the mare I mentioned, Finian was saying. Iris has been training her. The transformation is incredible. I don't have time for horse tours. The king's voice was clipped, impatient. It'll take 5 minutes. Trust me. I had just enough time to set down the pitchfork and try to wipe my hands clean before they rounded the corner. Finian smiled when he saw me. The king's expression didn't change at all. Good morning, Iris, Finian said cheerfully. I brought a skeptic who needs convincing about your skills. I curtsied awkwardly, keeping my eyes down. Your Majesty. Silence stretched. I could feel the weight of his gaze, heavy and assessing. Show him moonshine, Finian encouraged. My hands trembled slightly as I led the mare out of her stall. She'd been half wild when I'd started working with her, but now she moved with calm trust. Her ears pricked forward with curiosity rather than fear. I demonstrated a few basic commands, my voice soft and steady despite my racing heart. Moonshine responded beautifully, as if she could sense how important this was. She was considered untrainable, Finian told the king. Too skittish. They were going to put her down, and you stopped them. It wasn't a question. The king's eyes were on me now, not the horse. She just needed patience, I said quietly, and someone to listen to her. Something flickered in his expression. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. How do you know what she needs? He asked. I looked up at him then, meeting those pale eyes directly. Because I know what it's like to be misunderstood. To have everyone assume you're broken when you're just different. The words hung in the air between us. Finian glanced between us, his expression curious. The king's jaw tightened. Useful skill. His tone was dismissive, but his eyes told a different story. Finian, we have matters to discuss. Now. Of course. Finian shot me an apologetic look as they turned to leave. I was leading Moonshine back to her stall when I heard it. A low growl, barely audible. I turned just in time to see the king grab Finian's arm, pulling him to a stop several paces away. Stop coming here, the king said, his voice low and dangerous. Finian blinked. To the stables? Why? Because I'm ordering you to. Roman, that's an order, Beta. The use of rank rather than friendship was like a slap. Finian's expression shifted from confusion to hurt, to something harder. Understood, Your Majesty, he said formally. The king released him and strode away, his shoulders rigid with tension. I stood frozen in the stable, my heart pounding. I didn't understand what had just happened, but I felt its weight nonetheless. Finian returned alone a few minutes later. His easy smile was gone. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I won't be able to visit anymore. I heard." I swallowed. Did I do something wrong? No. He shook his head firmly. "This isn't about you, Iris. It's about him." He paused, then added carefully, "Be careful around the king. He's not himself lately." "What do you mean?" But Finian just gave me a sad smile and left without answering. That night, I lay awake again, trying to make sense of it all. The king's anger, his warnings, the way he looked at me like I was both invisible and the only thing he could see. I didn't understand, but some part of me, some deep instinctive part, whispered that I was in far more danger than I'd realized. Block 03. The king left our territory 2 days later, his entourage departing at dawn in a procession of horses and carriages. I watched from the stable loft, hidden among the hay bales, as he rode at the front on a massive black warhorse. He didn't look back, not once. I told myself I was relieved. Life returned to normal, or what passed for normal in a small mountain pack. The elders seemed pleased with how the visit had gone, though there were whispers about the king's mood, about tension between him and his beta. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. Whatever had happened wasn't my concern, except I couldn't stop thinking about it. 3 weeks passed. The autumn deepened into early winter, bringing frost that glittered on the morning grass and cold winds that made the horses restless. I spent my days in familiar routines, tending the stables, helping in the gardens before the ground froze completely, avoiding the social gatherings where I'd only feel out of place. Mara found me one evening in the small library, where I'd been reading by candlelight. "You're hiding again," she announced, dropping into the chair beside me. "I'm reading." "Same thing." She studied me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "You've been different since the king's visit. Quieter. Even more withdrawn than usual. I'm fine." "Iris." She put her hand over mine, her voice softening. "Talk to me. We used to tell each other everything. That was before. Before her life had blossomed into courtship and status, while mine had remained stagnant, before the distance between us had grown too wide to cross easily. But she was trying. And maybe I needed to try too. Something happened, I admitted quietly, with the king. I don't understand it, but he spoke to me. Twice. And both times he seemed, I struggled for the right word, angry. Like I'd done something wrong just by existing. Mara's eyes widened. "The Alpha King spoke to you, Iris? That's significant. Kings don't notice people like..." She caught herself, flushing. "I didn't mean it like that. People like me," I finished. "Invisible. Unremarkable. I know." "You're not unremarkable." Her voice was fierce now. "You're kind and skilled and one of the smartest people I know. You hide your light. You always have." My throat tightened. "Maybe there's no light to hide." "Don't." She squeezed my hand. "Don't let anyone make you believe that. Not even a king." We sat in silence for a moment, the candle flickering between us. Then Mara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are rumors, about why he's still unmated. They say he's waiting for something. Or someone. That he refuses every match the council suggests." She paused. "They say he's impossibly difficult. That his standards are so high, no one could ever meet them. That's not our concern," I said quietly. "Maybe not." Mara's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "But it's strange, isn't it? A king in his prime, powerful and wealthy, and yet completely alone. Makes you wonder what he's searching for." I wondered too. But I didn't say so aloud. The messenger arrived on a morning when snow had just begun to fall, soft and silent. I was in the stables, as always, when Colton himself came to find me. "Iris." His expression was carefully neutral. "You're wanted at the pack house. Immediately." My stomach dropped. "Why? What did I do?" "Nothing, as far as I know. Just come." I followed him through the snow, my mind racing through possibilities. Had someone complained about my work? Had I offended a visitor without realizing? The pack house loomed ahead, its stone walls imposing against the white landscape. Inside, the elders were gathered in the formal receiving room, and standing with them, travel-worn but unmistakable, was one of the king's royal guards. Everyone turned to look at me as I entered. I felt heat rise to my face, my palms growing damp. Iris, our pack alpha, an older man named Garrett, said carefully. This guard brings a message from the capital, from the king himself. The guard stepped forward, producing a sealed letter. The wax bore the royal crest, a wolf's head crowned in silver. For you, he said, his tone professionally blank. My hands shook as I took it. Everyone was watching, waiting. Open it, Garrett ordered. I broke the seal with clumsy fingers, unfolding the heavy parchment. The handwriting was bold and precise, each letter formed with exact control. Iris, your skills with horses have been brought to my attention. I require someone with your expertise at the capital. You will come immediately. This is not a request. Roman Castellan, Alpha King. The silence in the room was deafening. The king wants you at the capital? Garrett's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the confusion beneath it. For horse training? That's what it says. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. This is highly unusual, one of the elders murmured. The king has access to the finest trainers in the realm. Why would he summon someone from a small mountain pack? The guard cleared his throat. I'm not privy to His Majesty's reasoning. I'm simply here to escort her back. When? I asked faintly. We leave within the hour. An hour. I had 1 hour to pack up my entire life and leave everything I'd ever known. Garrett studied me intently. You understand this is a great honor, to serve the king directly. Yes, Alpha. The words felt hollow. Then you'll go, of course. Represent our pack well. There was no choice in it. When the Alpha King summoned you, you went. The journey to the capital took 4 days. The guard, his name was Thomas, was polite but distant, making it clear this was duty, not conversation. We traveled with 2 other guards, stopping at inns along the way. I spent the nights lying awake in unfamiliar beds, trying to understand what was happening. Your skills with horses. It was a plausible reason, believable even, but I kept remembering the way the king had looked at me, the warning he'd given. Stay away from my beta. This wasn't about horses, but if it wasn't about horses, what was it about? The capital appeared on the morning of the 5th day. A sprawling city built into the hillside, all white stone and soaring towers. At its heart stood the palace, massive and magnificent, with banners bearing the royal crest snapping in the wind. I'd never seen anything like it. My entire pack's territory could have fit in one corner of this city. Thomas led me through gates and courtyards. Past gardens even in winter were more beautiful than anything I'd ever tended. Servants and guards moved with purposeful efficiency, barely sparing me a glance. I felt small and out of place, my simple traveling clothes marking me as exactly what I was, a nobody from nowhere. We finally stopped at an elegant building near the main palace, the guest wing, Thomas explained. You'll stay here. Someone will come to explain your duties. When will I see the king? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Thomas's expression remained neutral. When he summons you. He left me in a room that was larger than the entire women's quarters back home. A fire burned in the hearth, and the bed was piled with furs and linens. A basin of fresh water waited on the dresser, and someone had left clothes laid out, simple but well made, far finer than anything I owned. I sank onto the edge of the bed, trembling. What had I gotten myself into? 3 days passed. No one summoned me. No one explained my duties. Servants brought meals to my room, but they hurried away before I could ask questions. I was a ghost in a golden cage, waiting for something I couldn't name. On the 4th day, I couldn't stand it anymore. I slipped out of my room and began to explore. The palace grounds were vast, but I eventually found the stables, grand structures that put our simple mountain buildings to shame. Inside, dozens of horses occupied stalls that were cleaner than most people's homes. I was examining a beautiful chestnut mare when a familiar voice spoke behind me. Iris? I spun to find Finian standing there, his expression caught between surprise and something that looked almost like worry. Finian. Relief flooded through me, a familiar face. I didn't know you'd be here. I work here. I live here. He moved closer, lowering his voice. What are you doing at the capital? I thought you were back with your pack. The king summoned me. For horse training, apparently. Something shuddered in Finian's expression. Horse training. That's what the letter said. And you believe that? The question hung between us. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm stable. I don't know what to believe, I admitted. I don't understand any of this. Why would he bring me here? Why hasn't anyone told me what I'm supposed to do? Finian ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with something. Iris, I need to tell you something. About Roman. About the king. He hasn't been himself since we left your territory. What do you mean? He's been impossible, angry at everything and everyone. Especially me. Finian's voice dropped. He's never used his rank against me before. We've been friends for years, but ever since that day in the stables, when he ordered me to stay away from you, my heart began to race. Why would he do that? Finian met my eyes, and in them I saw understanding that I wasn't ready for. Because he's jealous, he said quietly. The Alpha King is jealous of me spending time with you. The world seemed to tilt. That's impossible. I'm nothing. I'm no one. You're not no one to him. Finian stepped closer, his voice urgent. I don't know why or how, but something about you has gotten under his skin. And Roman doesn't handle that well. He spent his whole life in control of everything. His emotions, his pack, his kingdom. But this? You? He can't control it. That doesn't make sense. My voice was barely a whisper. He doesn't even know me, doesn't he? Finian asked gently. Or maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe he wants to. Before I could respond, a door slammed open. We both turned. The king stood in the stable entrance, backlit by afternoon sun. Even from a distance, I could feel the fury rolling off him in waves. Finian, he said, his voice dangerously soft. I thought I made myself clear. Roman, get out. Finian hesitated, glancing at me. Then, with obvious reluctance, he obeyed, leaving me alone with the king, and the look in his eyes as he approached made my breath catch, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. The stable felt smaller with him in it. Roman closed the distance between us with measured steps, each one deliberate, predatory. I backed up instinctively until my shoulders hit the wooden stall door behind me. Trapped. You've been avoiding me, he said. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. You're the one who's been avoiding me. I've been here for 4 days with no instructions, no explanations. I gave you a room, food, safety. You gave me a cage. The words came out sharper than I intended, fueled by days of confusion and fear. Why am I here? And don't tell me it's about horses. We both know that's a lie. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just stared at me, those pale eyes searching my face as if looking for something he'd lost. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, rougher. You're right. It's not about the horses. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then why? Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. The admission sounded like it cost him something. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw you in that garden, heard your voice, felt your pulse racing under my fingers. His hand lifted, and I thought for a moment he might touch me again, but he dropped it. Because watching Finian with you was driving me insane. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. But I never wanted Finian. I told you that. I know. He leaned closer, one hand bracing against the stall beside my head. That made it worse, knowing you didn't want him, but he still got to see you every morning. Talk to you, make you smile. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm the Alpha King. I command armies, rule territories, and yet I couldn't command you out of my head. So you summoned me here. My voice shook. Like I'm some possession you can just collect? Yes. No apology. No shame. Just brutal honesty. I told myself it was to keep you close. To understand what this is. His eyes locked on mine. I wanted you where no one else could have you. The possessiveness in his tone should have terrified me. Should have made me angry. But instead, heat flooded through my body, pooling low in my stomach. This was madness. He was the Alpha King, powerful, dangerous, completely out of my reach. And yet, you don't even know me, I whispered. Then let me. His free hand came up slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers brushed along my jaw, tilting my face up toward his. Let me know you, Iris. Every part, every secret, every fear. Why me? The question broke on a sob I hadn't meant to release. I'm nobody. There are hundreds of she-wolves more beautiful, more accomplished, more... I don't want them. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. I want the woman who saves broken horses, who hides in corners but has a spine of steel when challenged, who looked at me in that garden like I was something other than a crown and a title. He paused. I want you. The words hung between us, heavy with promise and threat. I'm scared, I admitted. Good. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You should be. I'm not an easy man, Iris. I'm demanding, possessive. I don't know how to be gentle with things I want. His forehead touched mine, and I felt his breath against my lips. But I swear to you, I will never hurt you. Never let anyone else hurt you. You'll want for nothing. Except freedom, I breathed. Is that what you want? Freedom from this? His hand slid into my hair, fingers tangling in the blonde strands. Tell me you don't feel it too, this pull, this need. I couldn't. Because I did feel it, had felt it from that first moment in the garden, when his eyes had pinned me in place. It terrified me, thrilled me, made me feel alive in a way I never had before. I feel it, I confessed. The sound he made was pure satisfaction. Then stop fighting me. I don't know how to do this. My hands came up, resting tentatively against his chest. I could feel his heart beating, fast, like mine. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. But we'll take this slow. I'll give you time to adjust, to learn the court, to decide if this is truly what you want. And if I decide it isn't, pain flashed across his features, then I'll let you go. It will kill me, but I'll let you go. I believed him. And that belief was perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. Okay? I whispered. Okay? Okay? I'll try. I'll stay. We'll see what this is. The smile that broke across his face transformed him completely. For just a moment, he wasn't the severe, untouchable alpha king. He was just a man who'd gotten what he wanted. You won't regret this, he promised. I wasn't sure I believed that, but I wanted to. The next morning, everything changed. A servant arrived at dawn with instructions. I was to meet with the palace mistress to begin learning court etiquette. There would be lessons in history, politics, dance, proper address. I was to be fitted for appropriate clothing, introduced to key members of the court. His Majesty wants you prepared, the servant explained, a middle-aged woman named Helena with kind eyes. The court can be challenging for outsiders. That was an understatement. The palace mistress, Lady Cordelia, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked at me like I was a stain on her pristine floors. She subjected me to 3 hours of instruction on everything from which fork to use to how deeply to curtsy based on rank. My head spun with rules and protocols. You'll never pass for nobility, she said bluntly during a break, but perhaps we can make you passable enough not to embarrass His Majesty. The words stung, but I kept my face neutral. I'd spent my whole life being underestimated. This was nothing new. The afternoon brought dress fittings, gowns in colors I'd never worn, fabrics so fine they seemed to shimmer. The seamstress, at least, was kind, adjusting and pinning with gentle efficiency. You have lovely coloring, she murmured, holding up a deep blue silk against my skin. Fair hair and skin like moonlight. Very striking with the right presentation. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked elegant, almost beautiful. His Majesty has excellent taste, the seamstress added with a knowing smile. Heat crept up my neck, so the staff knew. Of course they knew. Nothing stayed secret in a palace. That evening, a guard came to escort me to dinner, not in the Great Hall, but in the king's private dining room. Roman was already there, standing by the window overlooking the city. He turned when I entered, and I watched his eyes widen slightly, taking in the blue gown, my hair arranged in an intricate style by Helena. You look... He seemed to struggle for words. Beautiful. The seamstress did well, I said, trying to deflect. The seamstress had excellent material to work with. He pulled out a chair for me, a strangely courteous gesture from someone so powerful. Sit, please. Dinner was surprisingly intimate, just the two of us, served by silent attendants who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Roman asked about my day, listened intently as I described Lady Cordelia's brutal lessons. She's harsh, he acknowledged, but effective, and she'll protect you in her way. Cordelia is fiercely loyal to those she accepts. She hasn't accepted me. She will. His certainty was absolute. Once she sees what I see. And what's that? He set down his wineglass, regarding me seriously. Strength, resilience, intelligence hidden behind quiet observation. He paused. You remind me of someone. Who? My mother. The words were soft, almost reluctant. She was soft-spoken too, overlooked by those who valued flash over substance, but she was the strongest person I ever knew. When my father died and the pack tried to tear itself apart, she held it together through sheer force of will. His expression grew distant. She taught me that real power isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the one everyone turns to when the noise dies down. It was the most personal thing he'd shared. I felt the trust in it, the vulnerability. What happened to her? I asked gently. Fever, when I was 17. The pack healers couldn't save her. His jaw tightened. I became king too young, unprepared. I swore I'd never show weakness the way my father had. Never let emotions cloud my judgment. He looked at me. And then you happened. I'm sorry, I whispered. About your mother. Don't be. She lived fully. Loved deeply. She would have liked you, I think. A ghost of a smile. She always said I needed someone who could see past the crown. Someone who'd challenge me. I'm not sure I'm brave enough for that. You already do. Just by being yourself. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Tell me about your mother. You've mentioned her before. So I did. I told him about her quiet wisdom, her gardens, the way she could soothe any conflict with just a few carefully chosen words. How she'd died too young, leaving me adrift. How I'd spent 7 years trying to be useful enough to justify my place in a pack that never quite saw me. Roman listened without interruption, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my hand. You're not invisible anymore, he said when I finished. I see you, Iris. Every part. The intensity in his voice made my breath catch. This was real. Whatever was happening between us, it was real. The days began to blur into a strange new rhythm. Mornings with Lady Cordelia, learning to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Afternoons in the stables, where Roman had assigned me to work with some of the more difficult horses. A role that felt like coming home. Evenings with him, sometimes dining privately, sometimes walking the palace grounds. Always talking. He was different when we were alone. The harsh edges softened. He smiled more, laughed even when I told him stories about particularly stubborn horses or my failed attempts at court dancing. You're not that bad, he said one evening, after I'd described tripping over my own feet during a waltz lesson. Lady Cordelia said I moved like a newborn foal. Then I'll teach you myself. Before I could protest, he pulled me into his arms, one hand at my waist, the other capturing mine. Follow my lead. There was no music, but he began to move, guiding me through the steps with patient precision. His body was warm against mine, solid and sure. I stumbled once, but he caught me easily, his arm tightening around my waist. Trust me, he murmured. And somehow, impossibly, I did. We danced in silence, and I felt something shift between us. Deepen. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was something more dangerous, something that felt like it could consume us both. Iris, he said softly, and I looked up to find his eyes dark with emotion. I need to tell you something. My heart raced. What? The entire court will be there. There's a formal ball. I want... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want to introduce you, publicly. As someone under my protection, the implications hit me like a physical blow. Public acknowledgement from the king meant everything. It would elevate my status, yes, but it would also paint a target on my back. Every ambitious she-wolf in the realm would see me as competition, as a threat. Are you sure? I asked. I've never been more sure of anything, His hand came up to cup my face. I know it's fast. I know it's overwhelming. But I'm done hiding what you mean to me. What do I mean to you? He leaned down, his forehead touching mine. Everything, he breathed. You mean everything. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, reverent. His lips brushed mine softly, asking rather than demanding. I melted into him, my hand sliding up to his shoulders, and the kiss deepened. Heat flooded through me, pooling low in my belly. I'd never been kissed before, never wanted anyone the way I wanted him in this moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. 2 weeks, he said roughly, and then the whole world knows you're mine. Mine. The possessiveness should have scared me. Instead, it felt like coming home. But the palace was full of watching eyes. I felt them whenever I walked the corridors. Courtiers whispering, servants speculating. Most were merely curious, some were hostile. I learned quickly to keep my head high and my expression neutral, the way Roman had taught me. Never let them see weakness, he'd advised. The court respects strength above all else. Finian found me in the library 3 days before the ball. I'd been reading about the history of the kingdom, trying to prepare myself for the scrutiny to come. Iris. He sat down across from me, his expression serious. We need to talk. About what? About what you're walking into. He leaned forward, voice low. The ball isn't just a social event. It's a statement. If Roman presents you publicly, everyone will assume you're being considered as a potential queen. The word sent ice through my veins. That's not... We haven't discussed... Doesn't matter what you've discussed. That's how the court will see it. His eyes were kind, but worried. And there are people who will do anything to prevent a nobody from a mountain pack from becoming queen. People with power, with connections. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to prepare you. He paused. Roman is my friend, my king, and I've watched him become someone I barely recognize since he met you. Happier, yes, but also more volatile, more possessive. If anyone threatens you, I don't know what he'll do. He wouldn't. He would. Finian's voice was flat. For you, he would burn the kingdom down. The certainty in his words terrified me, and thrilled me, and made me understand, finally, the true weight of what I'd agreed to. What should I do? I whispered. Be careful. Trust no one except Roman. And... He smiled sadly. Be ready for your life to never be the same. As if it hadn't already been transformed beyond recognition. That night, lying in my grand bed in my beautiful room, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life, or the best decision I'd ever made. The night of the ball arrived, wrapped in winter's first real snowfall. Fat flakes drifted past my window as Helena helped me dress, her hands steady even as mine trembled. The gown was breathtaking, deep sapphire silk that brought out the blue in my eyes, with delicate silver embroidery along the bodice that caught the light like starlight. My blonde hair had been arranged in an elaborate style, woven through with silver threads that matched the dress. You look like a queen already, Helena murmured, stepping back to admire her work. The word sent a spike of anxiety through my chest. Queen. It seemed impossible, absurd. And yet... A knock at the door made us both turn. Roman entered, dismissing Helena with a nod. Then he just stood there, staring at me. Say something, I whispered, feeling exposed under his gaze. I have no words. His voice was rough with emotion. He crossed to me, taking my hands in his. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm terrified. I know. He lifted my hands to his lips, kissing each knuckle gently. But you're not alone. I'll be beside you every moment. And if anyone dares disrespect you, his eyes flashed with dangerous promise. They'll answer to me. Finian warned me about what this means, what people will assume. And what do you assume? Roman asked carefully. I met his gaze steadily. I assume that you're introducing me as someone important to you, someone you're considering for a permanent place in your life. Not considering. His hands tightened on mine, knowing. There's no one else, Iris. There never will be. You're mine, and I'm yours. And tonight everyone will understand that. The certainty in his voice steadied me. Then let's go face them. His smile was fierce with pride. That's my girl. The ballroom was a glittering spectacle of wealth and power. Hundreds of candles cast dancing light over women in jewel-toned gowns and men in formal dress. The air hummed with conversation and music, the string quartet playing something elegant and complex. Every head turned when we entered. Roman kept me close, his hand at the small of my back, as we descended the grand staircase. I felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers that spread like wildfire through the crowd. Who is she? From a mountain pack I heard, the king's new companion. Lady Cordelia appeared at our side, her expression approving for the first time since we'd met. Your Majesty, Miss Iris, you look lovely. Thank you for your guidance, Lady Cordelia, I said, executing the perfect curtsy she'd drilled into me. Something shifted in her sharp eyes. Respect, maybe. You're a quick study. That will serve you well tonight. The evening became a blur of introductions. Lords and ladies whose names I struggled to remember, visiting alphas from other territories. Council members who assessed me with varying degrees of skepticism. Roman navigated it all with effortless authority, never leaving my side, making it clear through every gesture and word that I was under his protection. But I felt the undercurrents, the she-wolves who looked at me with barely concealed hostility, the council members who frowned, clearly displeased by the king's choice. The whispered conversations that stopped when we approached. Dance with me, Roman murmured, leading me toward the floor as the quartet began a waltz. On the dance floor, in his arms, the rest of the room faded. He moved with fluid grace, guiding me through the steps we'd practiced. I felt safe here, in this moment. With his eyes on mine, and his hand steady at my waist. You're doing beautifully, he said softly. I can feel them watching, judging. Let them. Their opinions mean nothing to me. His hand tightened slightly. Only yours matters, Roman. I hesitated, then decided to be brave. What happens after tonight, when this becomes real in everyone's eyes? Then we make it official. His gaze was intense. I'll present you to the council, begin the formal courtship process. And when the time is right, he paused. I'll ask you to be my queen. My breath caught. Hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I'm not ready for that, I admitted. I know. That's why I'll wait. As long as you need. His thumb traced gentle circles on my back. But know this. My decision is made. You're the one I want beside me, the one I choose. The song ended. But before we could leave the floor, a voice cut through the applause. Your Majesty, surely you'll allow others to dance with your lovely companion? I turned to see a tall, elegant she-wolf approaching. She was stunning. Dark hair, aristocratic features, a gown that probably cost more than my pack's annual income, and her smile was pure poison. Lady Vivian, Roman said coolly, I wasn't aware you'd returned from the Northern Territories. Just arrived this evening. I wouldn't miss the ball. Her eyes raked over me, assessing and dismissing in one glance. And who is this charming creature? This is Iris, Roman said, his tone carrying a warning. And she's not available for dancing. How possessive. Vivian's laugh was like crystal breaking. But surely the king isn't so insecure as to fear a single dance. It was a calculated challenge. Refusing would make Roman look weak. Accepting would force me into Vivian's clutches. It's fine, I said quietly, though my stomach churned. One dance won't hurt. Roman's jaw tightened, but he nodded. One. Vivian swept me into the next dance before I could reconsider. Her grip was firm, her movements precise and perfectly controlled. So, she said conversationally, you're the mystery woman who's captured our king's attention. How unexpected, is it? I kept my voice neutral. Well, you're not exactly what one would expect for an alpha king's mate. No title, no connections, no particular beauty or accomplishment. Her smile sharpened. One wonders what hold you have over him. I don't have a hold over anyone, don't you? She leaned closer, voice dropping. Let me give you some advice, little wolf. The court is not kind to outsiders, especially outsiders who reach above their station. Whatever fantasy you're living will end. And when it does, you'll be left with nothing. Is that a threat? A warning? From someone who knows this world far better than you. Her eyes glittered with malice. Roman needs a queen who can match him in power and status, not a stable girl playing dress-up. The words hit their mark, stirring up every insecurity I'd tried to bury. But I thought of Roman's mother, soft-spoken but strong. I thought of the horses I'd saved, the respect I'd earned through patience and persistence. I thought of Roman's words, "You already are what I need." "Thank you for the warning, Lady Vivian," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I think I'll trust the king's judgment over yours." Her expression darkened. "You'll regret this. Perhaps." I met her gaze directly. "But that's my choice to make, not yours." The dance ended. I curtsied politely and walked away, feeling her hate like daggers in my back. Roman was waiting at the edge of the floor, his expression thunderous. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing I couldn't handle." I took his offered arm, leaning into his strength. "Though I think I just made my first real enemy. Vivian has been a problem for years. She expected—" He trailed off. "Expected to be queen," I finished. Understanding clicked into place. She was a candidate, before me. The council favored her. She has the right bloodline, the right connections. His voice was flat, and absolutely nothing I wanted in a mate. "She's beautiful. She's cruel." Roman stopped, turning to face me fully. "Beauty means nothing without kindness. Power means nothing without compassion. I've met 1,000 Vivians in my life, all polished surfaces and hollow cores." His hand cupped my face. "You're real, Iris. You're genuine. And that's worth more than all the titles and bloodlines in the realm." I wanted to believe him, tried to ignore the voice in my head that whispered Vivian's words. Stable girl playing dress-up. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. More dances, more introductions, more assessing stares. By the time Roman finally escorted me back to my rooms, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. "Stay," I said impulsively as he prepared to leave, "just for a moment." He hesitated, then nodded. We sat by the fire, my head resting against his shoulder, his arm around my waist. The silence was comfortable, safe. "I meant what I said earlier," Roman murmured. "About waiting, about giving you time." "I know." I turned to look up at him. "But I need you to understand. I'm not afraid of being queen. I'm afraid of not being enough, of failing you, of proving everyone right who says I don't belong. Then prove them wrong." His eyes blazed with certainty, "Not by becoming what they expect, but by being exactly who you are. That's what I fell in love with, Iris, your quiet strength, your compassion, the way you see people. Really see them, past the titles and pretense." He paused. "You saw me. Not the king. Just me." "I still do," I whispered. He kissed me then, deep and slow and full of promise. When we finally broke apart, I knew with absolute certainty this was where I belonged. 6 months later, the coronation ceremony was smaller than traditional, at my request. Just the council, key pack members, and those closest to us. I stood before the assembled crowd in a gown of white and silver, my blonde hair crowned with the queen's diadems that had been worn by Roman's mother. Lady Cordelia had tears in her eyes. Finian stood beside Roman, his smile genuine and warm. Even some of the council members who'd initially opposed the match looked pleased. Vivian had left the capital 3 months ago, after her attempt to spread rumors about my unsuitability had backfired spectacularly. Turned out the court respected strength more than bloodline, and I'd proven myself strong, not through grand gestures, but through steady, consistent work. I'd transformed the royal stables into a training center that attracted handlers from across the realm. I'd established programs to help smaller packs improve their resources. I'd sat in on council meetings, learning, listening, earning respect through patience and insight. I'd become what Roman had always seen in me, a queen. Do you, Iris of the Mountain Pack, accept the crown and all responsibilities that come with it? The High Elder's voice rang through the hall. I looked at Roman, standing tall and proud, his eyes full of love and certainty. "I do," I said clearly. The crown settled onto my head, surprisingly light. Or maybe I was just strong enough to carry it now. Roman stepped forward, taking my hands. "My queen, he said softly, for my ears alone. My heart. My king, I whispered back. My home. When he kissed me, the hall erupted in cheers. Later, during the celebration feast, Finian raised his glass. To the king and queen, he declared. May they rule with wisdom, strength, and the kind of love that transforms kingdoms. I caught Mara's eye across the room. She'd been granted a position in my personal household and had arrived 2 months ago, already making friends and thriving in ways she never could have back home. She grinned at me, joy radiating from her face. That night, standing on the balcony overlooking the city with Roman's arms around me, I thought about how far I'd come, from the invisible girl in the corner to the woman wearing a crown. From someone who'd thought herself unremarkable to someone who'd learned her own worth. What are you thinking? Roman murmured against my hair, that I was so afraid of not being enough. I said, but maybe I was always enough. I just needed someone to help me see it. You helped me see it too. He turned me to face him, his expression tender. I was so focused on being strong that I forgot how to be human. You reminded me that real strength includes vulnerability, that power without compassion is just tyranny. He kissed my forehead. You made me a better king, a better man. We made each other better, I corrected. Yes. His smile was radiant. We did. In the distance, I could hear music drifting from the great hall where the celebration continued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, councils to attend, territories to manage, a realm to help govern. But tonight was ours. Dance with me, Roman said, echoing that first private lesson months ago. There's no music up here. We don't need it. So we danced on the balcony under the stars, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds. The invisible girl and the lonely king, the stable hand and the ruler of the realm. 2 souls who'd recognized each other in the darkness and chosen to build something bright. And as snow began to fall softly around us, I finally understood what my mother had meant all those years ago. Some of us aren't meant to shine immediately. We're meant to grow slowly, steadily, into the light we were always capable of holding. I had found my light, and it was magnificent.